I think one of the things that can lead to estrangement, that can lead to fractured families, is that grandparents come in really, really hot on some things. A granddaughter or grandson might be struggling with something, and we come in full of opinions, full of life learned lessons that are valid, but we're not letting mom and or dad work through that situation with our grandchild. And our natural inclination as fathers to come in and fix everything sometimes gets in our way, and it doesn't serve us well, because we end up coming in and we're telling everybody what to do, we're directing everything, and we're not there as a coach, we're there as a manager. And our grandchildren and our adult children, they need us as a coach, not a manager anymore.
Welcome to The Power of Family, the podcast where we help families talk, listen, and connect across generations. I'm your host, Terry Willis. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, share this episode with a family member or friend, and leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more families, and your feedback helps us make this show even better for you and others. Today's conversation is about grandfatherhood, the kind of love, wisdom, and presence that can shape a family in ways we don't always see right away. Nobody really prepares you for how much becoming a grandfather changes your heart. It gives you a different view of family, legacy, and what it means to show up for the next generation. I'm joined today by Greg Payne for a thoughtful conversation about grandfathers, family connection, building trust across generations, and the quiet power of being present. Let's get into the conversation. Good morning, Greg Payne.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, the cool grandpa.
Yes.
So tell us more about the cool grandpa.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me on your program. This is an honor to be on talking with you and sharing information back and forth. So the Cool Grandpa podcast was started back in 2020 at this point, a couple of years after I became a grandfather for the first time. And the genesis of it was that I was looking around for examples, maybe some tips on how to be a cool grandpa. And what I was seeing was that grandfathers tended to be the butt of jokes. We were like on National Lampoon's Vacation, right? We were the guys that were falling asleep in the corner. We were checked out. All good things in that context. But if all that you're hearing is that grandfathers are villains, or they're checked out, or they're the butt of jokes, sometimes that could leave a little bit of a negative, perception about grandfathers. And I wanted to talk to grandfathers such as yourself, experts around grandparenting, as well as adult grandkids, to find out what it was that grandfathers did to have a lasting impact on their grandchildren. So that's where the genesis was. And, part of it was that I also wanted to wave the flag a little bit and go, hey, grandpas aren't just old guys that as soon as they become a grandfather, there's a rocking chair on the front porch. We're actually out there doing a lot of very cool things. So I decided to run with the Cool Grandpa podcast.
And I like that theme. I like that title. I like that theme, because we do not need to be typecast and stereotyped into a rocking chair. We're not there yet. We have a lot of wisdom to pass on to them, and we want to.
Absolutely. I think, we're as engaged and intentional as ever before.
Exactly, because they need us. They need us now as they have in the past. Greg, how has becoming a grandfather changed your understanding of leadership, legacy, and influence?
Wow. So as I've been going through this process of stepping into another stage of life, one of the things that's really hit me is that I think a lot of our fathers and even mothers, when you are that father or mother, you're thinking and acting a lot of times very tactically. And what I mean by that is that you're very concerned about the next business meeting, very concerned about the mortgage, very concerned about school, all those things that are right there in front of you. And I think as grandparents, we start to have a vision and a role that's much more strategic. We can start thinking about what life is going to be like for our grandchildren 20 years down the road. We can start thinking those long-term thoughts and even projections. And when it comes to the legacy part, I think the simple thing on legacy is we think about the stuff we leave behind, right? Did we leave an inheritance of some kind that's material, whether that's cash, whether it's real estate, whether it's, valuable baseball cards, whatever that is. I think sometimes when we think legacy, we think of stuff, but I like to switch it over where legacy becomes the values that we leave behind. Legacy becomes the feelings that the family has towards us that we may not always be aware of. And those legacy feelings could be that they knew that grandfather loved them unconditionally, that grandfather supported their mother, that grandfather supported their father, that grandfather was there emotionally for them. And I think that's one of the big things around legacy that I'm encouraged to see that's starting to change. That when it comes to legacy for grandfathers, it's not just about the stuff. The stuff can be fun, but the things that we leave behind, those feelings, those emotional connections, I think that's where the real value of legacy comes into play.
I liked how you separated money and stuff away from all of the rest, because we know more than often, and I'm literally going to say more than often, as I have learned and heard from others, it is that money and stuff that breeds conflict here. It breeds conflicts amongst the family. So I like how just giving them that unconditional love and being there for them stands foremost in that relationship with grandfather and the family. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
What does emotionally engaged grandfathering look like in real life?
Wow, great question. So I think emotionally engaged grandfathering means that we are very comfortable going up and putting our arms around our granddaughters, our grandsons, their moms and dads, telling them how proud we are of them. When we see them doing good and positive things, that we're out there sharing that connection and we're being very specific about that praise. And what I mean by that is, it's great that the granddaughter scored the winning goal in soccer, and we love that and we encourage it and we praise that. But we also want to be able to praise her for being honest with people when being honest wasn't always the easy thing to do. And we want to be there to also put our arms around them when life is tough. Because a lot of times, I think as we get older, we've been through, we've been through multiple heartbreaks before, whether it's heartbreaks in relationships, jobs that didn't work out, whatever that is. And we have a context around the degree of, let's say, sadness or grief or whatever that is. But for a lot of our grandchildren, when they go through these things, it's the first time for them. It may be the first breakup they've ever experienced. And that's going to be devastating versus us going like, you went out like 4 or 5 times. What's the big deal? That's not the attitude, right? We've got 50 something years plus of experience. We know that, going out on a handful of dates is not the end of the world. But for them, it is. It absolutely is. And for that young man, that young woman who's starting her career, and when they get the notice that they've been downsized or right-sized or, I don't know, just flat out laid off or fired, that's devastating to them. So for us to come up to them and understand and have that empathy about how hard that is, where we may have gone through that 3 or 4 times, and we know that there's always light at the other end of the tunnel. For them, they may not know that. So being emotionally present for them is emotionally present for the highs and the lows and not discounting their experience.
Good way of explaining it. It rings so true. What does respect look like between grandparents and parents today, especially when parenting styles differ across?
Respect can sometimes mean just keeping your mouth shut. And sometimes that silence is golden. And because parenting trends come and go. And again, I go back to that we've had experiences where we've seen 2 or 3 different parenting trends in our lifetime. But that young parent today, they may be embracing something because it's on social media and there's all sorts of blogs and there's all sorts of people telling them this is how you have to do it. And you and I may know that, hey, every family, every relationship, every circumstance is different, that there's not one size fits all, whether it's parenting, grandparenting, whatever. We need to be able to keep our mouth shut and support the moms and dads and let them find their way. And you know what? They're going to pick a parenting path that for us, we might get in our car when we drive home and we have all sorts of opinions about. Don't share those with those young parents. It'll turn them off and it'll cause friction. Just know that they're going to see this, and then 5 years down the road, they may have a complete 180 turn. As long as they're not endangering the grandkids themselves, let them find their own path. Let them have their own way of doing things. Give them the space that they need to breathe and respect their decisions. Even if it's not your decision, just respect and acknowledge. And like I said, sometimes silence is golden there.
And adding to that, because we raise that son or daughter, we understand their behavior as well. And so we know that they're going to need that space individually. And now that they're raising their children, we're going to see some of the same things that we went through with them passed on to their grandkids, and some of the things we wanted to correct them of, we're seeing it all over again. But as you said, here, this time is from a grandparent's perspective. And we know to be quiet, step back. It will happen the same way they learned the lessons in which we tried to explain to them when we were raising them. Now they're going to have to raise their kids and see, this is what dad or mom was telling me about. Here it is again.
Yeah.
History itself.
Or it certainly rhymes, that's for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you this one then. How do grandfathers create meaningful traditions and memories in a world where families are often busy, blended, or geographically separated?
Great question. So I think let me tackle the one where maybe grandparents are at a distance. And that could be anywhere from across town. We know there's places in Los Angeles where it might take you 2 hours to go 20 miles, but it could be that you're across the globe from each other. I think one of the things that grandparents can do is use technology and use it wisely to connect with their grandchildren. When they do that, find funny things that you can do together. Maybe it's the joke of the day. When the grandkids get on a Zoom call with you or a FaceTime call, maybe one of your traditions, as simple as it is just, you guys are going to be showing up with a joke of the day that you share. And that's a simple tradition, but it builds a connection. And it's okay if traditions are traditions for a while and then they go away. The other part of that too is going to be, what do families do when they're together? So when grandma and grandpa are in town visiting, or the grandkids are over and they're visiting, what are some of the things that you always do? One of the most impactful memories that I have was when I would visit my grandfather in Eastern Oregon. Is there was an A&W hamburger place in town. and this is a very small town in Oregon, we would go down and be at the drive-through, or not even I guess a drive-through, but it's the old one where you would put your order in and they would roller skate or walk out to the car with a tray and they'd put it on the car. And I remember getting A&W root beer and a cheeseburger and fries with my grandfather. And that was a great tradition that we had for a while when I was younger, going out to visit him. And what those traditions are, they're a way of saying, this is what our family does. This is what we do. This is who we are as a group. And I think a lot of us get wrapped up in traditions around holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, for example, other religious holidays or secular holidays. Could be 4th of July coming up, right? Whatever it is, maybe you have those traditions. And just, I think, understand that traditions bring you closer because it creates a sense of identity. And then also, one of the things that grandparents need to be aware of, it's okay if traditions go away at some point, because maybe those traditions were formed when grandchildren were little. And now that they're in high school, those traditions don't serve that high school age grandchild anymore. Maybe you have to create new traditions with that version of your grandchild. So that's my thoughts on traditions.
And each one of those memories in which you explain there is all about creating memories across a timeline for them. What values do you believe Gen X grandparents are uniquely positioned to pass down?
I think one of them goes back to the strengths that I see becoming mentioned time and again when you look at Generation X as a cohort, right? A lot of us were, quote, latchkey kids. And so that means that we got home from school and nobody was home for a couple of hours. Maybe mom was working, maybe she was volunteering. But at a certain age, you were responsible to come home, make yourself a peanut butter and jelly, do schoolwork, or at least you were supposed to do schoolwork, and then go play with friends, right? And so I think to a large extent, there's a large degree of independence and problem solving that we had just as a byproduct of growing up in the times that we did, that I think can really serve our grandchildren well. And those values can be a little bit more self-sufficiency than maybe they're used to, a little bit more problem solving that they're used to, meaning that maybe today a lot of parents step in and solve problems for the grandkids, where, sometimes you have to give the kids space and let them figure things out for themselves. So I think some of the values that I would see Generation X grandparents passing on is going back to a little bit more of figure it out for yourself. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Sometimes the things you work on aren't going to work out, but that's okay. Adjust and redo, and having maybe more confidence in your abilities than maybe you're currently growing up with now. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. All the sense. Yeah, it does. Because as you were explaining it, I was thinking back to my scenarios in raising my child and being with my grandkids and practically raising them at times as well. He does.
Yeah. I think sometimes, and this is where, your point earlier comes in with respect, is that on one hand, I think we want to go ahead. We're very comfortable with, I think, kids jumping in and failing and knowing that that's going to be okay because that was part of our experience. We tried to build things, we tried to do things, it failed. We learned something, we tried something again. The natural inclination of parents is to avoid failure. And I think some of the kids at school even get that messaging through school that failure's not good. Failure is to be avoided at all costs. And I think they lose out on that curiosity piece, and they lose out on understanding that failing is part of a process of learning, and there's actually some enjoyment in failing, depending on what the task is. That you learned something new, that you discovered something fun, that you had this experience that you never would have experienced had you not tried something and failed.
And applying that to business, it is said that if you have not failed, you have not learned anything yet.
Exactly.
Because life is full of pitfalls and failure along the way. If you could challenge every grandfather listening to you with one mindset shift, what would it be? And why does it matter right now?
Wow, great question. So I think one of the big mind shift ideas that I would put forward is that we need to be even better encouragers than maybe what we experienced as we were young fathers, as we were growing up ourselves. What I mean by that is, I think not that parenting is harder or easier, but I think it's different. And I think the comparison trap is so much more real with our young mothers and our young fathers that we need to be more vocal than maybe what we've been used to before in terms of encouragement, in terms of letting those young parents understand that we see the good things that they're doing and we see and acknowledge how tough things are for them. Where before we may have just kind of kept our mouth shut and just silently nodded to ourselves that, hey, they're doing a good job. Really happy with the way my daughter's raising those kids. Really pleased with the way my son is managing and leading his family. They need to hear that more from us. And that may not be our normal setting as grandfathers. So I would encourage us to shift gears a little bit, be more vocal with that praise, be more vocal, letting them know what a good job they're doing and that we see it.
I like how you put that together by giving them that pat on the back and not from that point of being dogmatic with them. Because as we know, as our children get older, they take their positions in life, and we don't want to be that grandparent. Well, we hope not to be that grandparent where every time we speak to them about trying to give them some kind of advice and guidance, they take the position where I don't want to hear it. So it's nice that I can hear it being said that give them that pat on the back. Because after all, they're the parent now. You're the grandparent.
Absolutely. And those young parents, they need that because there's so much out there that's telling them about how they're doing it wrong, how they're not being good parents, even more than I think we even realize. So if we can shift our minds to being, hey, I need to be more vocal about the positive feedback I give those young moms, those dads, I think everybody is served well by doing that.
And I will add to that, those young moms and young dads, especially in environments where it's tough alone, just being in the environment, they truly deserve some extra praise.
Absolutely.
Truly. What are some mistakes grandparents make when trying to stay connected with adult children and grandchildren?
Ooh, I think
it rides on what we just discussed.
Yes. I think one of the big mistakes that can pop up is that we share our opinions way more than we should. And, I always like that Mark Twain quote, and he probably stole it from somebody else. You've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use them in proportion. I think one of the things that can lead to estrangement, that can lead to fractured families, is that grandparents come in really, really hot on some things. A granddaughter or grandson might be struggling with something, and we come in full of opinions, full of life learned lessons that are valid, but we're not letting mom and or dad work through that situation with our grandchild. And our natural inclination as fathers to come in and fix everything sometimes gets in our way, and it doesn't serve us well, because we end up coming in and we're telling everybody what to do, we're directing everything, and we're not there as a coach, we're there as a manager. And our grandchildren and our adult children, they need us as a coach, not a manager anymore. And so when we take that approach as a coach, especially with grandchildren that might be struggling with certain things that maybe they're more comfortable sharing with grandparents than with parents, if we try to manage that, we're going to quickly lose that intimate relationship with them, that the grandchildren might feel like they're not being heard, we don't understand, that we're immediately trying to take over and give them orders, versus being that coach that asks a lot of open-ended questions and can help guide them to a place where they, I think, internally want to be, but they can't necessarily get there in one step. They need that coach to help them go through the steps to get to where they want to be.
Always helpful. In spite of how old we may get, we still sometimes can use that coach somewhere in our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How can Gen X grandparents use technology to deepen relationships rather than replace them?
Sure. So one of the things that we need to recognize is we need to meet our grandchildren and even our adult children. We need to meet them where they are when it comes to communication. When we were growing up, a lot of times that was a physical letter and a phone call Sunday nights when the rates were cheap. That's how we communicated with our grandparents, a lot of us. Kids today are going to be on different devices, different apps. They're going to be leveraging technology with their friends and even with their parents differently than maybe we do. So as grandparents, we need to meet them where they are, not force them to go where we're comfortable. A great way to do this is going to be, if they're using an application that's unfamiliar to you, ask them to show you how to set it up on your phone. Ask them how that application works. Ask them to teach you something, because now all of a sudden, instead of them being the student and you the teacher, they're the teacher and you're the student. And they're showing grandma and grandpa something really cool about how they use technology to communicate. Now, I will say, because a lot of Generation X, we had a leg in the digital world and a leg in the analog world. This doesn't mean we don't replace those in-person conversations or the phone calls. But for maybe just a check-in with the grandkids, maybe we use their favorite messaging app. Maybe we understand the rules of those applications, meaning that sometimes, the kids today on their applications don't always use punctuation the way we did, right?
Yeah.
If I don't have a period, I in the back of my mind, my teacher's going to give me a failing grade for not using a punctuation, a comma or a period or an exclamation mark. Kids today, with their communication styles, they really don't use punctuation. So that's something for us to learn. But use the technology, find out where they're at, and then adapt to them so that we can stay connected. Because if you don't, you're not going to have the connection touch points that you think you want or that you really desire to have.
And I would ask the grandchildren and the children, even today, be patient with us as we learn this technology, because sometimes they can get very impatient with us, very impatient. What tools, resources, or simple practices would you recommend for grandparents who want to build a stronger relationship with their grandchildren? And I know you had that toolbox. Okay, let's reach into it now.
Sure. So going back to our discussion about technology, if you're at a distance or even across town from your grandchildren, there's great applications out there that have online children's books where you could set up a time, whether it's a Zoom call or FaceTime, whatever it is, whatever your video conferencing, video chat app is, you can use these things with young grandchildren to read them bedtime stories or to read them age-appropriate books, right? And then a great part of that too is as the grandchildren are learning to read, they can read a book to grandpa and grandma. That's a great connection point for younger kids. For older kids, I would say, just like we said, find out what applications they're on and adopt those. Make friends with them. Also, allow those kids to be silly. Allow them to make mistakes when what they're sharing is out there. It may be cringeworthy to us as old as we are, but for them, they don't know any better yet, and they're having fun. So let them have a little bit of fun, as long as it's not hurting somebody or putting themselves in any kind of a jeopardy situation. The other tools, don't forget the simple things. Birthday cards, postcards every once in a while when you're on a business trip or just traveling for fun. Also, be sure to find out what they like and be ready to jump in and enjoy it. I know I've got grandkids now that are starting to get into Minecraft and some of these things, and I'm looking into how can we play this together online? How can I join my grandchildren in their online space so that we can play back and forth? And maybe we set a time at 7:00 to 7:30 one evening where we're playing together online and building that connection. So I think we can use both those in-person connection and those tools of creating traditions about when grandkids are at grandma and grandpa's house. You know, we always go out for A&W, grab a cheeseburger and a root beer, something different, or we can set up other kinds of traditions and other touch points. We also have all these videos now that people are taking. Heck, grab the videos that the kids have, learn how to do some video editing yourself, put together a fun little video clip of your time together at a national park and share that with them, because that becomes as impactful as having a shoebox full of photographs now.
As we wind down, Greg, how can someone reach you? How can someone who want to share with you, reach out to the cool granddad? How can they find you?
Sure. So a great way to find out what I'm doing, get connected with the podcast, some of the guest blogs that I have that are in different areas, go to cool-grandpa.us. And at that website, I've got contact forms. I've got some different things, free downloads. There's a lot of stuff that I'm giving away for free without you needing to give me your email address. So go there, check it out on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever your finer podcasts are hosted. Check out the Cool Grandpa podcast. And there's sure to be something that I've covered over the last 6 years that's going to be of benefit to you and something you're interested in.
As we move into tomorrow and beyond, may there be many more 6 years added to it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Terry.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Power of Family. I hope today's conversation reminded you that legacy is not only about what we leave behind, it's also about how we show up, how we listen, how we love, and how we stay connected while we still have the chance. Before you go, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It helps more families find these conversations, and it helps us continue making the show better for you and others. And if this episode made you think about a father, grandparent, parent, or loved one, send it to them. Sometimes one conversation can open the door to a deeper connection. Thank you again for being part of the Power of Family. Until the next time, keep listening, keep loving, and keep starting the conversation.